up, guys? It is your man Dave and your man Duncan from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this album, Duncan and I have been checking out the new release from Brighton quartet, Chalk Hands. The band's new album, Don't Think About Death, will be released on March 18th.
Bad name for an album. See, as soon as you say don't think about something, what you doing, Dave?
Yeah.
Thinking about it, unless that was their plan all along. I'm just going to say, well played, Chalk Hands. Well played.
March 18th via Dog Night Productions. This is a debut album from Chalk Hands, recorded in the early part of 2021 with now esteemed producer Mr. Lewis Johns, also responsible for Rollo Tomasi and Svalbard and Employed to Serve, etc., etc.
Yeah, been a busy guy.
Yes, yeah. Don't Think About Death follows the band's breakout Burrows and Other Hideouts EP and subsequent split single release in 2019. Whilst the subject underpinning the album may seem obvious from the title, the manner in which Don't Think About Death considers mortality is far from so. Rather, is measured as a measured exploration of the multiple conflicts we accumulate just from thinking and not thinking about death. Some may lie down in fear of it or choose to shut out the thought altogether. Others will find comfort in the communal knowledge of its ubiquitous inevitability and use that as motivation for making more with the time they have. The majority of us, however, experience both at some point or other, as well as everything in between, and the act of living with this dichotomy is what the record plays out.
It's a very well written press statement.
Yeah.
Like incredibly credible.
Yeah, I had to actually think about it when I was...
Yeah, I was like, I liked it. I liked it a lot.
But there was actually, when I was reading the press release, there was kind of one kind of line or quote in the press release that kind of summarised this album. What?
Did it involve boobs? That's usually how you get me. If there's anything anywhere that says the word boobs, I'm like, now you have my attention. I do the old Leonardo DiCaprio from what was the gift that he does from Django.
Yeah.
He's like,
yeah,
that's me every single time. Every single you mention boobs, I'm in, Dave. Was it boobs?
No boobs.
All right.
The line was 35 minutes of tender chaos.
Yeah. You know what sold that to me right there? 35 minutes. We've been doing some long albums of late, so you get a 35-minute album. Duncan is laughing.
All in.
All in.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good description for this album, because as much as like it has these like very kind of beautifully haunting post-rock type melodies, those really kind of like fills your headphones when you're listening to it. It does also have this other side that's quite kind of angular and quite fiery. Yeah. It kind of delves more into kind of math rock and post-hardcore. There's wee moments that kind of skirts around post-metal at times as well too. But and you can hear those elements from the get-go on this. The way they kind of maneuver between these kind of like very kind of jarring, reminding me a bit of Loma Prieta, those kind of types of kind of rhythms, into like clean kind of flowing pick guitars and like a bass that kind of dots around the kind of melody underneath it all. And although like this release has these kind of like kind of warm swaths of like ambience, and there's this very kind of poignant kind of melody, that kind of more like energized kind of side of the band does come with that kind of like kind of sensitive side. It's quite emotive. And
Tots
Tots and Mosh. It's a
Tots and Mosh album. There's no getting around it. Like, it weirdly reminded me of like the early 2000s where there was that swath of Glassjaw bands.
Yeah,
Glassjaw came out, did their thing, and then there was just a sea of bands that were like, that's our sound.
Yes.
I kind of reminded, and mostly I think it's, to me, it's like part of it's the vocals, but it's mostly the dual guitar work. There's always something melodic happening with one of the guitars panned either to the right or to the left. There's always something keeping, even when they go in that angular direction, that kind of scratchier, more aggressive, kind of almost staccato type sound.
Yeah.
The other guitar, for the most part, is still driving a melody right through, and they never really take their foot off that at all. And I think it's probably their, I don't want to steal your thunder here, it's their it's maybe their greatest weapon, but in my opinion a little bit of a hindrance, and we'll get into that, justify that stance a little bit later on, Dave.
Interesting. Yeah, I kind of found I got more emotion from the vocals personally. I liked it's a kind of almost kind of dual vocal. They've got Tommy and Antoine doing kind of both vocals on
Tommy
on
the French guy, yeah.
Tommy is not the French guy.
Oh, right.
I'm assuming that's Antoine. But there's a lot of feeling comes through in the vocal delivery. I kind of found myself drawn to the tone of the vocals. I thought that emotion really came through on the album.
It's honest.
Very much so. Like it's quite. There's moments on that they're quite gritty, and it's got a kind of hardcore type kind of roar to it. You'll hear that on the opening track, "Feel Grasp Restore." But then there's moments where they go into more kind of like spoken words on "A Means to an End," and then you've got kind of very kind of delicate vocals on "A Velleity," and I think that they've really captured some really cool vocal moments. I feel like you can really hear that they're really trying to kind of bare their soul on those tracks. I really did like the vocals on the album. Weirdly though, it's very strange, but one of my favourite tracks on the album was the title track. Which doesn't really have much in the way of vocals on it at all. It's like 85% instrumental, but the kind of music of it took me back, put me in mind of a band called Shels from like early 2000s. They were a kind of British/American post-rock group, just like lots of kind of layers and textures all kind of woven together, and then they kind of build it into this like kind of math rock type kind of frenzy at the end, before bringing in the vocals for the last part at the kind of end of the song. But they also bring in some brass right at the end of that song, which I absolutely loved. I thought that was a brilliant idea, bringing in the brass at the end there. Again, it put me in mind of Shels a little bit, but for me that was like the kind of highlight of the album was that track, which was quite surprising. I felt like that track could have ended the album, if I'm honest. There is one more track at the end called The Bridge, which is more of a kind of dark, kind of moody outro, which was cool. But I felt like the title track would have been a better option to end the album. It felt more kind of climactic for me. I think The Bridge would have worked better as a bridge in the middle of the album, personally. But, that's just me. But I felt like, yeah, the track at the end was cool, but like I felt like it should have probably ended on the track before. Production, like once again, absolutely brilliant production from Lewis Bronze.
Yeah.
This is like the perfect choice for this band. Like, like if you look at his resume, working with bands like Svalbard and Royal Tomasi, he's used to dealing with bands that are very varied in style, have a lot of kind of light and shade. And this is one of those types of albums, and he absolutely nails it. You know, it sounds massive, but it's very balanced as well. The mix is really kind of spacious and clean, but it's still got a bit of punch to it. And I loved how you could hear every kind of like bass lick underneath the kind of weight of all the other instrumentation. I thought it was really cool. Yeah, he's a talented son of a bitch. And actually, I was thinking about it earlier, we've been on a bit of a kind of recent spree of interviewing producers on a recent podcast, so I was thinking that might be an interesting guest to have on in the future if he's up for it. But yeah, I enjoyed this for the most part. I thought it was a pretty decent for a debut album. Yeah, pretty good attempt. I think they have a ton of potential, and I think they've done really well to put across what type of band they want to be. I don't think it sounds confused or unsure of itself. I think there's maybe lacking in a few hooks here and there. It maybe does get a little bit familiar by the end of the album. But when I hear tracks like the title track, Don't Think About Death, that kind of excites me as to what they will do next, because it absolutely shows me they have what it takes to make a great album and make another great record after this one. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they do next. Quite enjoyed this one. What do you think? What do you make of it?
Yeah, for the most part, I think I'm there with you. I think like the first thing that really sold it for me is the production. I think is very, very, very clean. I think that's the best way to describe the productions that we've heard thus far from this guy. Is everything is it's just very audible. and there's no point where I'm like, I really wish I could hear more of. It's just like there's a real craft in that, and he nails it regardless of the kind of setup. And yeah, granted that the bands that he's working with are ones that maybe have a bit more complexity of the sound, but he really manages to distill it down to if I can't hear the guitar, then you can't hear the guitar, which means there's no guitar. I liked a lot of this. I'll get my likes out the way. I'll pivot back to some of my issues with it. But yeah, like I think it's a very emotionally weighty album.
Yep, for sure.
Like even if you're not fully paying attention to the lyrics of the album, which apparently I wasn't because I missed the entire song that was sung in French. Just didn't. It was all about the vibe, Dave. I was in the zone. But you like at points I could feel the hair on the back of my hand, and my arms kind of stand up at certain bits where there's just a particular raw vocal line that comes over these really, really powerfully emotive guitars. And a lot of that, like I loved the Joe guitar work. They, at times playing very much the same thing for heaviness, but at other moments we'll just go off and explore space. And the production just really gave it room to do that, and I thought that worked very well for them. I think when they need to kind of bring it in and get a bit gruff, they are very easy and able to make that transition, and it works very well against their sound. Similar to you, Don't Think About Death is an interesting experimentation for the band. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like a darker Maybe She Will. I really liked that element of just them just building upon these different textures and ideas.
Yeah.
And they certainly could have done more of that in here. But then again, this is a 35-minute album, which I like the fact that it's a 35-minute album. And you put more of them in there, Dave, guess what? The album gets longer. And I don't think that's a smart move. Not for this sort of music. It did remind me of the early 2000s. And I was like, it's not emo, but there's a way to these really, and the UK almost had carte blanche when it come to a lot of these bands that were just really, really rawly kind of emotive about what they did, that somehow straddled kind of the kind of post-rock, math rock, and kind of almost post-hardcore world, and they would mix all these elements in, and they were very interesting. A lot of those bands have kind of disappeared, but these guys here like seem to be playing in that territory, and I like that. I think every musician in this band is above solid. I love the drum work on this. I thought it was really, really, really good. The production is, once again, chef's kiss. It seems it's not overproduced. It sounded natural. It sounded weighty. And the guy was adding nuance to certain parts that I enjoyed. So from that point of view, once again, really, really enjoy that. My kind of issue with this one is that I feel that they have a formula, regardless how the elements that they bring in, whether it's a kind of a matty, posty, rocky sort of thing that they bring in against their kind of post-hardcore sound, they do have a formula. And once you've went through this album once, I don't think it necessarily... Like, my score after listening to it once is exactly the same score I'm going to give it after listening to it 3 times. I didn't, on repeat listens, feel myself being any further drawn into it. I delivered everything on one listen, which, like a selfish reviewer wants. You want that one listen. Here's my score. Check, please. Remember and tip your waiter. But I think from my perspective, I don't know, with bands that like carry that kind of emotional baggage, you sometimes expect further depth the more you listen to it, and that never really gravitated to me. And once I was very aware of, like, the majority of songs that are not trying to do something different are all 5 minutes long, and I don't necessarily think they need to be that length. I think they maybe overplay certain elements one too many times, or they explore space in an interesting way to begin with, but maybe they spend a little bit too much time in that space, and that is purely them. This is a reviewer's point of view. Musically, it doesn't upset me to listen to it, or I don't think it's bad. I just think that at times they indulge themselves a little bit more than I think is absolutely 100% necessary for the song. and that's about it. Like I say, it's a really well written, really well recorded, and an interesting listen.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like yourself, that the moments where I was like, right, that's an interesting choice, are the moments they don't do a huge amount on this album, but once first album, you get out there, you put you like it's like setting up stalls at a market. Like, your first album is buy everything, and then the next time you come to the market, you're like, well, look, this didn't sell, this didn't work out too great for me. This is my niche. This is where I go. And I think there are elements here. It would not surprise me if the follow-up album is longer than this and contains more of those moments where they're exploring more textures and space. They're very fucking good at it. And another great British band. Great British band that are coming out with a debut, which is really exciting. So whilst I'm not saying it is my favourite thing I've heard this month, there's a lot to be excited about here. And I think there's a market for it, especially post-COVID. I think there's a lot of bands going down the hateful route, and there's a lot of bands going down the this is the cheeriest album you will hear route. And I think there is a gap in the middle for bands to start exploring vulnerability and emotion, and they have that in fucking spades. So yeah,
I agree with a lot of that. So scoring wise for this one, it's my grade was kind of back and forth on this one. I started at 1, and there was moments on it I was like, oh wait, actually this is actually slightly higher than I'm thinking, but then there was other moments where it kind of came back down. But I think overall I ended up about a 3.5 out of 5 on this one. I think it's a really good mix of styles. I don't think they push any of their styles too much or too little. I think the balance is really good. And I like that kind of light and shade they've got. They're really good at that. I think there are some experimental moments on this which really work. The title track being one of them. I love that kind of build, and I loved the brass at the end. I thought it was fantastic. Last track, I didn't really see the point of it, to be honest. I would have probably put it in the middle of the album if it was me. But overall, still thoroughly enjoyed this. For a debut album, they've got a ton of potential. I think comparing it to other bands of this kind of style, I think they're still a little bit off, but I think they'll absolutely grow. And I think you're right. I think after this album comes out, they'll probably start to kind of figure out what type of sound and what worked from this album that they can use on the next one. So yeah, overall I'm landing about 3.5 on this one.
Interestingly enough, I am coming in with the same grade. It's a 3.5 for me. That's how I felt when I first listened to it. After the third listen, I was still sitting at 3.5, so it didn't come down at all. It didn't go any higher, but I think it's once again showing that the UK, like a lot of scenes just now, is showing a great deal of diversity in its alternative and heavy music. And Chalk Hands are another band from the UK that just are bringing attention and focus to this small island, Dave. So yeah, 3.5 out of 5 for me.
Excellent. So Don't Think About Death by Chalk Hands.
You're thinking about it though, aren't you? You're thinking about it.
Every time. Out on March 18th via Dog Nights Productions. I'll put some links below to the band's Facebook, to the pre-order and stuff for the album, so you can check it out. And let us know what you think. Check out the single, check out the album, drop some comments in below. Happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. And we'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.